Hello everyone, my name is Jun. I repair watches as a hobby, and I appreciate you watching. Today, I'll be working on one of my favorites, the Citizen Bullhead. It runs and the chronograph works, but honestly, almost everything else is wrong. The flyback doesn't reset the hand to 0. And clearly, this is a Frankenwatch, built from parts of several different watches. The subdial hands are not original, and the day and day discs don't match. One is white, the other black. They should be the same color. Even the case back is from another model. The case number doesn't match. So, is it worth buying and repairing a watch like this? Absolutely. The Citizen Bullhead is a classic 1970s chronograph known for its bold bullhead design with a crown and pushers on top. It became even more iconic when Brad Pitt wore one in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's just a season, but it's undeniably cool. Mine is too far gone for a perfect restoration, but we can get it running well, enough for daily use. Servicing this movement is not easy. A professional watchmaker might charge around 500 US dollar or more plus parts. Or they may not even accept the job. The reason is simple. Most of these watches are in poor condition, and restoring them to meet the owner's expectation is often unrealistic. This movement isn't high-end, and the build quality isn't exceptional. It's just Citizen. Back in the day, these watches were used heavily, often without proper servicing, and simply worn until they stopped working. Much like how many people treat quartz watches today. The dial is aged and glued down. That's common with this model. The dial quality is low, and the feet are fragile compared to other brands. It's a 50-year-old watch. We should expect things to be broken or worn out. I've removed the automatic winding module and released the mainspring. I also removed the balance assembly and pallet fork. No issues there. Now I'm removing the chronograph module. Before that, start the chronograph and remove these two springs from the bridge. It makes disassembly easier and safer. This chronograph module is infamous among watchmakers. Complex and tricky to reassemble. Will soon. Why soon? Here is the center chronograph wheel and the minute recording wheel. This friction spring is essential for smooth operation, but it's often missing. This is the pillar wheel spring and flyback lever spring and the chronograph operating lever. The date dial is held by two tabs. The dial guard is secured with 4 screws. Underneath, you'll find a typical calendar system layout on the guard plate. Be careful removing this plate. Don't bend the hour recording wheel pivot. Here is the hour recording wheel and its stop lever. One note, Citizen hasn't published a technical guide for this movement online. Some old watchmakers may have the original book, but it's not accessible. So I'm relying on experience. Removing fragile parts first is a good rule of thumb. So I started with the chronograph parts, then worked outward. No need to remove the minute wheel friction spring, but don't lose it during cleaning. These screws are reverse threaded. The pillar oil post is weak. Tighten or loosen it wrong, and it will snap. This is a known issue. Here is the click. I didn't disassemble it this time. There is a tiny spring I didn't want to lose. This is a safe compromise for a hobbyist. All the complex parts are out. These are the last components on this side. Now disassembling the setting system. There is a tiny spring, so I cover it to prevent it flying off. No matter how careful you are, it will try to escape. Every part matters. Lose one, and you will need to source a replacement. Be cautious during cleaning. The base movement is disassembled. Now onto the sub-modules. This is the reset hammer and spring for the hour recorder. This chronograph module is the most complex part. I have returned the screw to its place. This module uses many similar but slightly different screws. Using the wrong one can damage parts. Here is the lock for the minute recording wheel. This part causes a well-known issue in this movement, which I will face later. These components handle the reset action. They must be cleaned and lubricated for smooth operation. Here is the mainspring. I removed it from the barrel for cleaning. You can use a knife blade to open the lid, but I failed to open it safely. Luckily, it wasn't a disaster, but unless you are sure it needs servicing, it's better not to open the mainspring. Disassembly complete. Time to clean. We need to remove old oil and grease. I use isopropyl alcohol for pre-cleaning. For the mainspring, I use a cut of a piece of a paper. This is Citizen's shock absorbing system called Parashock. We will clean these separately. The cover jewel holds oil and protects the pivot from dust. We should remove it before cleaning, otherwise dirty oil stays trapped. But it's tricky, so skip it unless you are confident. After pre-cleaning, I use a watch parts cleaner and ultrasonic cleaner. But you can also use IPA instead. There are many parts, so I clean them in groups. The right side is rinsing first, and the left side goes next. IPA and parts are in the jar on the right. IPA removes water effectively. Then I dry everything under cover for a few hours. I don't use IPA for the balance wheel or pallet fork because it can damage the glue used on them. Winding wheels have tiny pinions inside, so I use a special mix solution for those. Now cleaning the cover jewel. It had old oil, so I polished it. Installing the cover jewel is tricky. It's tiny and requires patience. To hold and rotate the spring, I used my smallest screwdriver, just 0.6 millimeter wide. Then I applied fresh oil from this side. Compared to the cover jewel, cleaning and assembling Parashock is easier. I removed old oil from the cap jewel. This spring absorbs both vertical and lateral shocks. I'm placing the cap jewel. pressing it down and rotating it to lock it in place. Again, not an easy task. You can skip it unless you are confident. You can add oil from this side without disassembling. It's not ideal, but better than breaking or losing parts. This is an automatic winding movement, so the main spring barrel needs special grease. We should use a dedicated tool to wind and install the spring. Or you can wind it by hand. It is not recommended, but sometimes necessary. So I'll show you how I do it. But still, disassembling the mainspring is not advised for hobbyists. The spring must sit clockwise and flat in the barrel. Looks good. I lubricated the upper and closed the lid. This is a key maintenance point. It must be lubricated so the wheel rotates smoothly. This wheel directly drives our recording wheel. If it sticks, the watch will stop or lose amplitude when the chronograph is stopped. Here is another critical part that needs lubrication. An intermediate wheel for the minutes recorder. If it's dry, the watch may stop when the chronograph is stopped. The center chronograph wheel needs lubrication for the same reason. We'll get to that later. Now I'm assembling the base movement. Don't forget to place the intermediate wheels for the automatic winding system and the minute recorder. Once all the wheels are aligned, place the bridge. Make sure every pivot sits properly in its jewel or hole. Secure it with 3 screws and lubricate the pivots. I use Citizen AO3 oil, but any light viscosity oil like Mobius 9010 works fine. I flipped the movement to lubricate the pivots on the other side. I also installed the cannon pinion and the minute wheel. Now I'm installing the crown wheel, the pillar wheel core, and the pillar wheel. Make sure the pillar wheel isn't upside down. And don't over tighten the screw. It can snap the post. Secure the ratchet wheel with its reverse threaded screw, but first check how it engages with the others. This spring is essential to the flyback system. If you don't feel a click when resetting, it may be broken. And that means the reset could fail. Let's assemble the winding and setting mechanism. I have applied grease to all metal on metal contact points. There are many small parts involved here. When installing this wheel, the flat side goes up and the tapered side faces down. This assembly is called the locking bar. It handles the day and date quick set. Here is the setting lever. It controls the locking bar through the small T-shaped part. Installing this spring can be frustrating. Take your time with the spring for the locking bar. This setting lever spring covers that spring and a few other small parts. Once it's installed, double check everything, especially that locking bar spring. This lever advances the day when pushed. It's part of the day quickset system. Once we cover it with this plate, we can test the time and day date setting. Alright, let's move on to the chronograph module. It controls start, stop, and flyback. Most of its parts are dedicated to the flyback function. This movement had a flyback issue. It couldn't reset the hand to 0. See this scratch? That's damage caused by failed flyback action. We need to lubricate these contact points to prevent further damage. I have applied grease to protect them. The tricky part is the lubricant. It's picky. Grease should work best in theory, but sometimes it makes the action feel stiff. In that case, I reduce the amount or even switch to oil. Installing the reset lever is tough. It's under spring tension and hard to align. This spring is part of the buffer system. It absorbs shock during flyback, but if installed incorrectly, it blocks the reset. Place the cover carefully and secure it with 2 screws. If this spring is damaged, it won't lock the minute wheel when the chronograph stops. And yes, this one was damaged. I'll show you later. Check that the hammer moves smoothly. If it feels stiff, something is wrong and it could damage parts. Test the flyback action. Make sure the buffer lever near the flyback lever moves properly. This is the operating lever for the hour recording wheel. Let's install the chronograph module. I've greased the pillar wheel and installed the operating lever. This is the final key part. This wheel must be lubricated. If not, again, the watch will stop when the chronograph is stopped. The core of this wheel must rotate smoothly. After applying a tiny bit of oil, I installed it into the movement. Installing the escape wheel is delicate. Take your time and make sure the pivot sits in the jewel. Place the friction spring, then install the minute recording wheel. This plate must be installed while the chronograph is running, otherwise it can block parts. But we cannot see the current mode until the bridge is placed. Let's see. It looks like it's in stopped mode. So I pushed the lever to toggle it. Let's try again. Don't force anything. You could break the escape wheel pivot or damage the lock lever. Once the pivot and lever are aligned and the hammer isn't jammed, I screw it in loosely, not all the way. Then I check again. The wheels and lock lever must be seated properly. The escape wheel should rotate smoothly. Once confirmed, I tighten it fully. Everything should now move smoothly. I have greased the hammer spring and installed it. Let's test it. The chronograph runs, stops, and resets. Did you notice? The minutes recording wheel moved slightly after the reset. It should stay locked at the 0. The cause was a slightly bent lock spring. It's fragile and easy to deform. If you operate it without grease, it will damage parts. Anyway, I replaced it with a new one. Now the minute recording wheel stays locked. I would say this chronograph module isn't very robust by design. That might sound unfair because any chronograph will fail without lubrication. But this one supports flyback during running, which requires more force. If not serviced properly, it's more prone to damage than others. Anyway, my one is a Frankenwatch, possibly built from damaged parts. It's a good example of challenges in servicing this Citizen movement. The next problem, I made a small mistake. That's not a problem. The real problem is I really messed up. I broke a screw. Remember when I said not to over tighten? I did exactly that. Removing a broken screw is beyond this video. I handled it off camera. Let's keep going. I'm installing the hour recording wheel. This must be done while the chronograph is running. Otherwise, this lock spring blocks installation. Final check for this layer. Then place the guard plate and secure it with 3 screws. All chronograph parts are installed. Let's install the pallet fork and balance assembly to get it running again. I'm installing the pallet fork. I verified the pivots are seated, then tightened the screws. I'm installing the balance assembly. No issues. It starts running and the chronograph works as expected. I can't wait to see the final result. But there is still more to do. To match the day and date dial colors, I bought a black one. It came with a dial guard plate, but I'm only using the dial. I placed the dial guard and secured it with 4 screws. Some screws were magnetized, so I demagnetized them after cleaning. That fixes one issue. It already looks much better. Next up, the broken dial and mismatched hands. You can find generic dials for this watch on eBay. I bought a set with a dial and hands, but I decided to stick with the original. So I reglued it. I reset the chronograph to 0 before installing the hands. When installing the center chronograph hand, you need to support the wheel from the back. I used a tiny screw to support the wheel. Without it, the wheel or jewels could be damaged by the pressure of the hand press. Then installed a new hand onto the center wheel. It takes a bit of force. Not much, but enough. I'm not restoring the case this time, but we should replace the gaskets. So I disassembling the case. The pusher is held in place with a C-clip. I cleaned the parts off camera, and now I'm reassembling them. And this raises an unexpected problem at the end. One of the pushers doesn't belong to this case. We will see the problem soon. I did a quick cosmetic fix. Blacked out the edge of the dial. I also inked the engravings, filled them with black, then wiped off the excess with alcohol. Time for final assembly. I'm placing the movement into the case. When installing the stem, find the right angle and insert it gently. No force needed. I secured the movement with case clamps. I forgot to install the automatic winding system, so doing that right now. The Citizen Bullhead and its movement are personal favorites. I have repaired a few of these. Since I buy watches sold as is for parts or repair, they always come with issues. I will summarize weak points and tips in the video description. To be clear, this watch is not for everyone anymore. If you already own one, keep it. Don't sell the heritage. It's a beautiful timepiece. But I will be honest, they are a pain to buy. Thanks to Brad Pitt, they are overpriced and overvalued. And they are getting hard to repair. Alright, assembly complete. I was confident everything worked. But the flyback didn't work at all after casing the movement. The cause was completely unexpected. One of the pushers was too short. It couldn't reach the flyback lever. So I swapped the short and long pushers, just like the previous watchmaker did. Not ideal, but it works. Here is the finished watch. Let's see how much it's improved. The chronograph starts, stops, and resets perfectly. Flyback without stopping also works. The case hasn't been restored and the dial hasn't been replaced. But the aged look suits the story of this watch. It feels like it belongs to a time that's past. It has seen better days, or maybe once upon a time. Alright, that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm already working on the next piece, so I'll see you again soon. Until then, take care.